and welcome to a brand new week of learning. Just so you're aware, the lessons this week are going to be very much so you have to do them in order. So as you can see on this lesson, 25B, you need to complete this lesson first before you go to C or D, just because the other two won't make as much sense until you've done the examples that we're doing today. So what we're going to start off with is we're going to start off by finding the missing measures or length measures of each of these triangles. So what we have is, I'm going to switch over to the dot cam for a moment, is if we were in class, we would have cutouts and we would be measuring the lengths of each of these triangles and finding the measure lengths with protractors. But because we are online and I know you don't have protractors and many of you don't have rulers at home, we're going to do it a different way. So I am going to give us two of the three side lengths for each of these triangles. And then what we're going to do is we're going to find the opposite over hypotenuse and adjacent over hypotenuse fractions. So in this first triangle, we're dealing with ABC first. So sorry, we're dealing with ABC. So we're dealing with this triangle down here, which means we're basing everything off of angle A, and our right angle is angle B. So we're going to go back over to our document. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start off by finding the missing side length. So as we saw in our picture, AB and BC are the legs of our triangle, and the hypotenuse is AC. So in order to find AC, we need to do Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So our A in this case is 5. So we know 5 squared is 25. And we're going to add that to our B, which is 12. So we're going to do 12 squared, which is 144. So we're going to do 25 plus 144, and we get 169. So in order to find that third side, what we're going to do is we're going to take the square root of our answer. So when we add 25 and 144 together, we get 169, and the square root of 169 is 13. So our missing side is 13. So now, for opposite over hypotenuse, what we're going to do is we're going to look at our picture. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the opposites over hypotenuse. So BC is our side that is opposite of our angle A. So we're going to put BC divided by our hypotenuse, which is AC. So we're going to come back over here. So for opposite over hypotenuse, we're literally going to write 12 divided by 13 because it's opposite over hypotenuse. And then in our calculator, we're going to type 12 divided by 13. And when we type it in, we're going to get a decimal. And what we're going to do is we're going to round it to 2 decimal places just because otherwise it would go on forever. So 12 divided by 13 gives us 0.92. So all we're doing right now is we're finding the measure lengths, and then we're doing opposite over hypotenuse, and now we're going to do adjacent over hypotenuse. So if BC is opposite AB and AC is our hypotenuse, that means that AB is our adjacent. So for adjacent over hypotenuse, we're going to type 5 over 12, and then we're going to type it in our calculator. And so 5 divided by 12 gives us 0.42, because in my calculator it says 0.416 repeating forever and ever. The 6 in the third decimal place means that we're going to round up our second decimal place, and so the 1 rounds up to 2. Okay. Oh wait, sorry, my mistake. I typed in 12 instead of 13. I very much so apologize for that. So that should be 5 divided by 13. Not 5 divided by 12. So I apologize on that front. It should be 0.38 because there's a 4 in the third decimal place, which means that it does not round the 8 up. So I apologize. It should be 0.38. I mistyped. Okay, moving on to the next triangle. So we have the missing side. So we're going to come over to our triangle so that we can see which missing side we have. So we were given DE and EF, which means, again, we're missing our hypotenuse. So that means we need to add the two together. So we have A and B, and we need to find C. So we're going to use Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So our DE is equal to A. So we have 3 squared. So 3 times 3 equals 9. And we're going to add that to 4 squared. So 4 squared is 16. We're going to add that together. When you add them together, you get 25. And 25 is a perfect square. And the square root of that is 5. So DF equals 5. So now we're going to come over here to opposite over hypotenuse. So we need to figure out which side is opposite of our given and marked angle. So we have our marked angle, so we're looking for the side that's opposite. So the side that's opposite is EF. So we're going to put EF over our hypotenuse, which is DF. So we're putting EF over DF. So we have 4 divided by 5 equals, oh, it made it into a little fraction thing. That's fine. So we're going to type it in our calculator. 4 divided by 5 equals 0.8. Fairly straightforward. So now we're going to do the adjacent. So see how it's attached? It's one of the sides of our angle over hypotenuse. So we're doing adjacent over hypotenuse. So we're doing DE divided by DF. And this time, I'm going to use the right numbers. So we have 3 divided by 5. And that's going to equal 0.6. Okay. So again, we're just setting up, we're finding our missing links using opposite over hypotenuse and adjacent, or finding opposite over hypotenuse and adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay. So the next one, we're looking for GHI. So we're looking for which side we don't have. So we don't have GH, which is one of our legs. GI is our hypotenuse, which means that GI is our C. We'll use HI as our B squared, or our B, and GH will be our A. So we're going to solve for the missing side. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're solving for a missing leg side. So what that means is we are going to do our diagonal, our hypotenuse, our C squared minus our B squared, because we're solving for the missing side. So that means we're going to do 8 squared, which is 64, minus 6 squared, which is 36. And we get 28. So 28 isn't one of our square numbers. And if you're wondering what I mean by a square number, so there are numbers that are perfect squares, like 9, 25, 100, 144. And there is a document under classwork that I believe is just labeled perfect squares through 30 or something like that. And it lists all the perfect squares up through 30. And so that means it's 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 17 squared, 29 squared. So use that to help you, especially so you don't have to do as much math. Memorize it. It'll super duper help you. Okay. So we did 8 squared minus 6 squared. And when we do that, we get 28. 28 is not a square number. So we need to push the square root button on our calculator. And when we do that, we get 5.291502, yada, yada, yada. So we're going to round to 2 decimal places. Okay, 2 decimal places. So GH equals 5.29. 5.29. Okay. So now for opposite over hypotenuse, we're going to come over to our picture and we're going to find the side that's opposite our missing angle. And we're going to put it over hypotenuse. So it's going to be GH over GI. So it's going to be GH over GI. So we have 5.29 5.29 divided by GI, which is 8. So then we're going to type it in our calculator. So we have 5.29 divided by 8, which gives us 0.66. Right, type it in my calculator, I get 0.66125, but because we're rounding to 2 decimal places, the 1 means that we don't round up, so we leave it as 0.66. And now for our adjacent over hypotenuse, we're going to put our other side over our hypotenuse. So we have 6 divided by 8, which equals, whoa, I don't know where the end came from, 0.75. So now we go on to our next. And we have our next triangle. So our next triangle is up here in the corner. So our marked side is L, which means that JK and KL are the legs of this triangle, and JL is the hypotenuse. So JL is the hypotenuse. So we're going to do the same thing that we did here. We're going to do our hypotenuse squared minus our leg squared. So again, since we don't know the 6.93 off the top of our heads, I'm going to suggest that we do that first so that we know exactly what number we're subtracting from 64. So we're going to do 6.93 times 6.93 in order to find 6.93 squared. 6.93 squared equals 43.659. Okay, so we're going to round that to 43.66. So now we're going to do hypotenuse squared minus the number we just found, our leg squared. So we have 64 minus 43.66, and it's going to equal 20.34. So we're going to take the square root of that, and we get 4.5. I apologize. I miscalculated something. So 6.93 squared is actually 48.0249. Where I got 43.659, I don't know. We all make mistakes, so I apologize. So we're actually going to do 64 minus 48.02. So 64 minus 48.02 equals 15.98. 15.98. So if we take the square root of 15.98, we get 3.997. The 7 means that we're going to round the 9 up, and the rounding the 9 up means it turns into a 0, and yada, yada, yada. It turns into 4. So JK equals 4. We can also check that. The reason that I knew that it wasn't quite right is because when I found the square root using the 43, it was 4.5. And I know that couldn't be right because the 30 right here means that it's going to be a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And so that showed me that I did something wrong. So that's an excellent way to figure out if you did something wrong, is to look at the angle measurements and make sure that your math matches. Okay. So I apologize for how long that took, but now we're moving on to opposite over hypotenuse. So we're coming over to our picture. So we're doing opposite over hypotenuse. So we're going to do JK over JL. So we're doing JK over JL. So we have 4 divided by 8 because we're doing JK over JL. And it equals 0.5. Okay, so now we're going to do adjacent over hypotenuse. So that means we're going to do the other side. So our 6.93 divided by 8. So our 6.93 divided by 8 equals 0.87. Because when I typed it in my calculator, I got 0.86625. So we're going to round that to 0.87. Okay. Next side, or next triangle. So our next triangle is MNO. So we have MNO. So our marked angle is M, which means that our 2 legs are going to be MN and NO, with our hypotenuse being MO. I'm trying to enunciate so we don't get confused. So our MO is our hypotenuse, which means we're going to do 8.5 minus 7.5. So we're going to do 8.5 times 8.5, and we get 72.25. So now we're going to do 7.5 times 7.5, and we get 56.25. So now we're going to subtract those two numbers. So we have 72.25 minus 56.25 equals 16. And 16 is a perfect square. So that means we can easily take the square root of 16. So the square root of 16 is 4. So that means 4 times 4 equals 16. So our missing side length is 16. So now we're going to come over to our picture and we're going to figure out which side is opposite our marked angle. So the side that's opposite of our marked angle is NO. So that means for our opposite over hypotenuse, we're going to do NO divided by MO. NO divided by MO. So no divided by MO. So we have 4 divided by 8.5. So we have 4 divided by 8.5. And that equals 0.47, especially because the third decimal place is a 0. So that means when we round it, it's just going to be 0.47. Okay, so for our adjacent over hypotenuse, since we already used the 4, that means it's going to be 7.5 divided by 8.5. So 7.5 divided by 8.5. And we get, I have no idea what my computer decided to do. Oh, I think I know what happened. Yeah, that's what it did. It decided to turn the fraction in the middle. Whoops, we're gonna do it this way so it doesn't do that, so you can see what I typed. Okay, so 7.5 divided by 8.5 equals 0.88, because the next decimal after that is a 2, which means that it doesn't round. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, now that we've found these 5 triangles, what we're going to do is we're going to use triangles that are similar. So that means it's going to be scaled versions of the above triangles. So now we have to find the scaled versions of all those. So I've given us some numbers to help us out so that we can figure out what's happening. So for this first one, we're going to be scrolling up and down a lot, so I apologize in advance. So for this first one, I gave us our 6 divided by 6.5. I gave us our opposite over hypotenuse. So our opposite over hypotenuse up here was BC over AC. So that means we can fill in our B prime C prime and our A prime C prime, because it's going to be similar to our triangle up here. So our B prime C prime is going to be 6. Our hypotenuse is going to be 6.5, because again, similar, which means that it's going to be the same proportions. So if BC was on top up here, that means B prime C prime is going to be on top down here. And if we type it in our calculators, we should get the exact same decimal as we did up here. And when I typed 6 divided by 6.5 in my calculator, I got 0.92, which gives us the exact same proportion. So now, looking at our adjacent over hypotenuse. So again, we know it's going to be over 6.5 because whatever hypotenuse it is, it's going to be the same. But now we need to figure out what the scale factor is. So how do we get from 12 to 6? Well, if we divide by 2, so if we divide 12 by 2, we get 6. So then we think through, okay, well, what's 13 divided by 2? Well, when we do 13 divided by 2, we get 6.5. So that means our theory that the scale factor is half, or divide by 2, is right. So we're going to do 5 divided by 2. So 5 divided by 2 is going to be 2.5. So that means our adjacent over hypotenuse is going to be 2.5 divided by 6.5, which equals, oh, it did the weird thing again. I'll fix it in a moment. 3/8. Okay. Whoops. 3/8. Okay, so we did 2.5 space 6 Okay, there we go. It doesn't like it when with the decimals. But then we have 0.38 equals our 0.38. So again, the proportions are going to stay the same, the answers we get, when we figure out similar triangles, okay? So what we are going to do is we are going to do not the next one, but we're going to do number 3. I'm going to have you do a couple of these on your own, but I'm leaving some of them, I'm leaving you the easy ones to do. You should be able to figure out the scale factor very easily, okay? So we're going to do number 3. So we're going to skip to triangle G prime, H prime, I prime. So we know that we're going to be using our numbers up here and our numbers down here. So we know that the 3 for 3, our opposite over hypotenuse is GH over GI. So that means our opposite over hypotenuse down here is also going to be GH or G prime H prime over G prime I prime. So we're keeping it the same. Our proportions are going to be the same. They're going to be equal, especially when we divide out the decimals. So we're going to divide out the decimals. What is 7.9 divided by 12? Should equal 0.66. And it does, because when we're rounding to 2 decimal places, we're rounding that 3rd decimal place up. So we have 0.66. So now we need to find our missing H prime, I prime. So for this one, we need to figure out how we get from 8 to 12. So what do we multiply to get 8 to 12? So an easy way to do that is to do 12 divided by 8. When we do 12 divided by 8, we get 1.5. Right? That was the same thing as when we were doing proportions. We did prime divided by original to find the scale factor. If we did it for that first part, we would get the same thing for the first one. If we did 6.5 divided by 13, we get 0.5 or 1/2. Okay? So you just need to do it for one of the numbers so that you can figure out the scale factor. So now in order to find the missing H prime, I prime, we need to multiply our original HI by the scale factor. So our scale factor is 1.5. So in our calculator, we're going to do 6 times 1.5. And we get 9. So for our adjacent over hypotenuse, we're going to have 9 divided by 12. It's going to be the same proportion. It's going to be the corresponding sides. So we have HI over GI in the original. So that means down here it's going to be H prime I prime over G prime I prime. So we have 6 over 12. So 6 divided by 12 is 0.75, which matches our proportion up here. So now what we're going to do is we are going to do the next one together as well. And then I'm going to leave you to do 2 and 5 on your own. So we are doing number 4 together. So number 4, we have to figure out which sides they gave us. So up here, we had NO divided by MO for our opposite over hypotenuse. So that means down here, if we had NO up there, we have NO down here. Whoops, wait. Sorry, I apologize. That was for number 5. We're doing number 4. Again, I apologize. Number 4, we are doing JK over JL, because that's what we were given for opposite over hypotenuse. So down here, we're going to type 10.4, and our hypotenuse is 12. Again, 10.4 and 12, because up here it was 4 over 8. Did we do this right? One sec. Okay, so I typoed. instead of 10.4 divided by 12 should actually be in the adjacent divided by hypotenuse. So I apologize, which means that our 10.4, we're going to be comparing our 6.93 over 8 to our 10.4 divided by 12. Again, I apologize. I mistyped. So that means that we're going to be comparing KL divided by JL. We're doing KL divided by JL. So we have 10.4 over 12. So that means our K prime L prime is going to be 10.4, and our J prime L prime is still 12. I apologize. Yes, that was my fault. I apologize. Yes, I've made several mistakes. It's okay. This is life. Okay, so now we need to divide it out to see if our numbers match. So we have 10.4 divided by 12, and we get 0.87. Okay, so we have 0.87, which matches what we have on top. So now we need to find our J prime, K prime. So let's use our JL and our J prime L prime. So we're going to do prime divided by original. So we're going to do 12 divided by 8, and we get 1.5 again. If you're wondering how I figured out that I put the adjacent instead of the opposite, it's because of that 1.5. Because if you did 4 times 1.5, you do not get 10. 4 times 1.5 gives you 6, which is how I knew that I had the adjacent instead of the opposite. So for our opposite over hypotenuse, it's going to be J prime K prime over J prime L prime. So we have 6 divided by 12, which equals 0.5. Okay. So now on your own, you need to complete lines 2 and 5 in the bottom part. And if you have questions, text me. Or call me or email me, or you can type a private comment on this assignment. But just a reminder, use what you're given, and I apologize for how horrible this last problem was. If you were confused, please call me and I will try to re-explain it without me fumbling over my words. So I apologize. Again, if you have questions, please contact me. And until next time, adios.